A man had two sons. And the younger son said to his father, "Father, give me this share of the inheritance that should come to me." So his father gave it to him. After a few days, he took his inheritance and departed to a distant country where he spent his inheritance on a life of dissipation. When he had freely spent everything, a severe famine struck that land, and he was left in dire need. He hired himself out to one of the local farmers to tend his swine, and he longed to fill his stomach on the pods in which the swine fed, but nobody gave him any. Coming to his senses, he thought, how many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food to eat? Here I am, dying of hunger. He said to himself, this is what I'll do. I'll get up, and I'll go to my father, and I'll say to my father, "Father, I've sinned against heaven, against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Treat me as you would treat one of your hired workers." So he got up and went off. While he was still a long way off, his father caught sight of him, and filled with compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said, "Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son." But his father said, "Quickly, get the finest robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Then slaughter the fattened calf, and we must have a feast. Because this son of mine was dead and now he's alive. He was lost and he's been found." Then the celebration began. Meanwhile, his older son was coming in from the field, and when he heard the sounds of the celebration, he inquired to one of the servants what it meant. And the servant said to him, "Your brother has returned, and so your father has slaughtered the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." He became angry, and when he refused to go inside, his father came out to him and pleaded with him. His son said to him, "Look, all these years I have slaved for you, and never once did I disobey your orders. Yet when your son returns, who swallowed up your property with prostitutes, for him you slaughtered the fattened calf." His father said to him, "My son, you're with me always. Everything I have is yours. But now we must celebrate and rejoice because your brother was dead and now he's alive. He was lost and now he's found." My dad, the thing is, my dad, he did all the things. He did all of the things you should do to have a good heart. He did all the things you should do. He took all the steps. The problem is he inherited a broken heart. No matter how far he ran, no matter how many steps he took, my dad inherited a broken heart. And so have I. And so have you. And the reality is, no matter how much we run, no matter how much we do, no matter how many steps we take in this life, none of those steps will heal your broken heart. At some point, that heart is going to stop beating. Let's talk about that for a second. At one point, your heart is going to stop beating. You're like, "Why, Father? Talk about death." Because I don't know if you heard, the latest statistic is that the human mortality rate continues to hover roughly around 100%. So this is going to happen. Imagine that moment. Actually, no, like imagine the moment after that moment. Imagine the moment that here you're dead now, and you're standing before the gates of heaven. And they ask you a question. They just say, why should we let you in? Like, what's your answer? A lot of us say, well, I'm good. I'm a good person. I keep the commandments. I went to Seek 24. Like, I go to Sunday Mass. Like, I led a Bible study, for crying out loud. Like, I talk to people. They came to Jesus. That's great. I didn't hurt too many people. I didn't kill anyone. Okay, that's congratulations. At the same time, you realize this, that none of those are the right answers. Even after all that work, even after all those steps, you and I will still have a broken heart. Scripture says that, right? Scripture says, all have sinned and have fallen short of the glory of God. And not only that, but even if so many of us who say we're a good person, are we really? What if you're not? What if I'm not? And honestly, what if I'm not a good person? What if I am someone who's hurt someone? What if I'm not someone who shows up and prays regularly? What if I actually am someone? What if I actually have killed someone? Here's the question, then what? What kind of steps can I take? What if I'm not a good person? What kind of steps can I take then? You guys, this is what we just heard Dr. Sri talk about. This is the good news. What we heard Monsignor Shea talk about last night. This is the great news, is that every one of us, we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And yet, he still wants you. It's crazy. I love what St. Paul wrote to the Romans. He said this, he said, you know, for a good person, for someone who is that kind of heroic person, for someone who is that kind of kind and nice person, you might find someone who's courageous enough to die. But then he says, but God proves his love for us in that while we were still sinners, while our hearts were still just torn apart, while we were still broken, while we were still his enemies, that's when Christ died for us. Because that's the reality, is that who's taken the steps? You don't need to take the steps. God has taken all the steps. Jesus Christ has taken all the steps. In fact, he can't go any further. He couldn't take any more steps, even if he wanted to. Think about the incredible, immeasurable, infinite number of steps that God took to leave heaven, to be in the womb of Mary, to be born in a cave. You realize that when Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River, I don't know if you know this, but geologically or geographically or somewhere metaphysically, that's the lowest spot on the face of the earth, where the Jordan River enters into the Dead Sea, where Jesus was baptized. He went as low as possible. On the cross, he let them take everything from him. They took his freedom by nailing his hands to the cross. They took his independence by nailing his feet to the cross. They took his dignity by stripping his clothes off of him. They covered him with shame, and he gladly accepted it. Because why? Because he will not limit the number of steps he's willing to take for you. In fact, we know this. After he dies, where does he go? He goes literally all the way to Sheol, all the way to hell. Why? Because there's not any number of steps that Jesus won't take for you. He's taken all the steps. Because he's loved you when you're unlovable. He wants you when you're unwanted. He won't give up on you when you've even given up on yourself. Love you at some point. The question is, will you give God permission to love you right now? Because it's only you right now that he wants to love. It's only you right now that he can love. He has taken every step that he possibly can to get to your heart. Except for one. There's only one step left. You know, the younger son and the older son, they're so different from each other, but they're exactly like us. I love this moment when the younger son realizes. He came to himself and he realized How many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food to eat? Here's what I shall do. That moment, that's the moment. Here's what I'm going to do. I'll get up and go to my father. That step is so important. Now, here's why it's important. When the son comes to I don't know if you realize this, but in the parable of the prodigal son, when he asks his father for the inheritance, some people say that he's basically saying, Dad, I can't wait for you to die. Give me the money now. That's not wrong. But there's even a worse insult that he gives to his father, where it says after a few days, he departed for a distant country. What's he saying there? What he's saying in that moment is, I don't want anything to do with you. I'm leaving the family land. I'm leaving the family. I don't want to be associated with you at all. I'm going to a distant country where no one knows you and all they know is me. In that moment, when he gets up and he walks back to his father and he gives that speech, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Here's the big thing. He's not being hard on himself. He's telling the truth. When he says, I no longer deserve to be called your son, he is telling the truth. He has disqualified himself. He has left his family. He has left home and he regrets it. What does a father do? When he sees him, what does a father do? He runs. He runs as fast as he can. He runs as far as he can to his son. Because why? Because his son needs to be healed. This is the reality for a lot of us tonight. We need to be healed. The father he is in the son. He has taken every step possible. There's only one step left. What we need to be healed. And what I'm praying for tonight is I'm praying for this, that many of us experience this twofold miracle. The twofold miracle is this, the twofold conviction. The first conviction is, I need to be convicted of my sin. I need to be convicted that I no longer deserve to be called his son anymore. I need to be convicted that because of what I've done, I'm guilty. I'm praying that every one of us has that conviction, that first miracle, because that's a miracle. It's a miracle of grace. I'm convicted that I don't actually deserve to be called his child anymore. But I'm praying that every one of us experiences the second miracle, because we can't have the first one without the second one. First one without the second one is really, really horrible. The second miracle is to be convicted of his mercy. Imagine to be convicted of, no, my sin, I no longer deserve to be called your son, but then convicted of his grace, but you call me yours. Because this is what mercy is. That's what I want for every one of us tonight. That we have the opportunity for reconciliation. But here's the thing. I don't want to go reconciliation because I don't know. I don't have to admit that I'm broken. You inherited a broken heart. That's just the truth. And you and I have done things that have hurt others and have hurt our Father's heart. That's just the truth. Mercy is the greatest form of love. Think about that. Mercy is the biggest way God can love us. If the question is, does God have your permission to love you? Mercy is the best way, the biggest, the deepest kind of love. And here's the crazy thing. In order to qualify for mercy, you have to first need mercy. Mercy is the love that we need the most, but we deserve the least. If you and I can tell you, I can do this. At any moment, I can say, gosh, Father, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve to be called your son. But I also know my Father's heart. I know that he says, but I want you to be healed. Mercy for all of us tonight is the love that we need the most, but we deserve the least. So the question remains, does God have your permission to do that tonight? Does he have your permission to heal you tonight because you have a broken heart? Will you let him do a miracle in your life tonight? Coming before him and saying, I need you. You know what the crazy thing is? In this parable, the whole parable begins, Luke chapter 16, begins with Jesus saying he sees the Pharisees. And he sees people resenting those people like us who have broken hearts. And he says, to them, here's the parable. Because a lot of us here tonight are the older son. A lot of us here tonight are the ones who, I stayed home. I didn't go out and do all the things I wanted to do. That's what they did. That's what my roommate did. That's what the person down the hallway did. I didn't do any of those things. I was a good kid. I was a church kid. I lead a Bible study for crying out loud, and now I'm mad about it. I said yes to discipleship, and now I resent it. Why? because all these years I have slaved for you, and I obeyed, not one of your orders did I disobey your orders, but you didn't rejoice in me. We have to look at our hearts right now. The younger son, he left home and regretted it. The older son stayed home and resented it. The question we have to ask is, am I one of the kids who stayed home? And now I'm mad about it. Pay attention to this. When the father hears that the older son won't come in, what does he do? He takes steps. He goes out to him and he begs him to come inside. The younger son, he regretted it and needed to be healed. The older son resented it and he needed to be held. Some of us here tonight, that's what we need. Because we're serving, we're slaving, we're working, we're doing all the right things, but we don't know what it is to be held by the Father. Why? Because remember, all of Catholicism, all of Christianity comes down to one question. Does your Father have your permission to love you as you are? The Father says, son, come in, rejoice with us, be part of the celebration. I won't. Why? Because I do not give you permission to love me as I am. Again, that leads us to this moment. This moment is so important. God has gone as far as he can. One step remains. Your step. Your yes. We get to the gates of heaven. Why should we let you in? The only answer is because Jesus has died for me. This is the only answer. Get to the gates of heaven. Why should we let you in? Because the Son has died for me. There's a second half to that. Because Jesus has died for me. So now I live for him. That's the answer. Why should we let you in? Because Jesus has taken all the steps and I let him. I just took one. You know, so often people, when it comes to tonight, we have a chance for confession where we just get to say, Jesus, I'm going to let you heal me. In adoration where we get to say, Jesus, I'm going to let you hold me. That's it tonight. These are two choices. It's that or regret. It's that or resentment. It's either tonight, Jesus, heal me, or Jesus, hold me. So often people say religion is a crutch, that religion is it's a straitjacket, that religion is this thing that binds us. Actually, you know, it's interesting, because the word religare, religion, actually means to bind. I don't know if you knew that. So when someone says religion is a straitjacket, religion just binds us, they're not wrong. Religare, to bind. Here's the great news though. I need that. You know the word sin comes from the German word Sünde, which means sunder. When I sin, I'm fractured. When I sin, I'm split. When I sin, I have a broken heart. And so what do I need? I need to be bound. I need to be held. I need to be healed. Tonight, there's only one step left unstepped. Will you let yourself be healed? Will you let yourself be held? Will you let yourself be loved? Jesus has taken all the steps except this last step. This one step. This last step is all it takes. And this last step is yours to take.